Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael. As you learned last week on the Channel 3 News, broadcasting pioneer and legend Tony Adams has passed away. He died March 31st at the age of 95. Tony was probably best known for his sports reporting and his trademark "Good Night, Good Sports" sign-off, but he loved being the longtime host of this program.
And so nice to have you with us again for another edition of Across the Fence. And our guest.
For 4 decades, he was Across the Fence. Tony loved everything about the program, especially the people.
Across the Fence means Vermont. It is uniquely Vermont, and I think people know that. The interest with people is the important thing with Across the Fence, I think.
Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Tony.
He was at ease conversing with just about anyone, regarding just about anything.
Just how serious do you think the acid rain problem is?
Well, we think it's quite serious. And
Tony was most at home talking with writers. Perhaps the only thing he enjoyed more than sports and reading was interviewing an author.
General Howard Coffin.
Yes. Yes.
Tony's run on Across the Fence started in 1966 when he was hired by the first producer of Across the Fence, UVM Extension's Karen Christensen.
She had seen me do interviews on sports and news and liked the way I did interviews and made people feel at ease. So she came to me and asked me if I'd do it. And I said, I'd love to do it, but I said, Red Martin has a rule that we can't pick up other duties at the station. And she said, let me handle that. So when you see Red, she explained it. Red puffed on his cigar, blew some smoke at her, and said, as long as it doesn't interfere with his sports work, it's okay. And the rest is history. I did it, for 35, 40 years?
Across the Fence has the honor of being the longest-running daily farm and home program in the...
What did Across the Fence mean to you, those 35, 40 years?
Well, it was unique in this respect. It was on 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. It had different shows every day. I didn't know ahead of time. Sometimes I'd ask Glenn about it, but other times I wouldn't. We'd have an author on. We'd have a doctor from the medical center. We'd have an agronomist talking about feeding the soil and so forth. And we had the young kids in there for 4-H things. And one of the 4-H things was kind of funny because they were making things by themselves. And this kid had made a lamp that he had made from scratch. We plugged it in, and there was a bulb in it. I had a microphone in my left hand to interview him, and I said to him, well, can we turn it on? And he was kind of sitting with me, so I reached over to turn it on, and when I did, I got a shock. There was no ground in it. And I'm standing there, and I finally let go. And and afterwards, I remember talking to the doctor I visited within a week and told him about it, and he said to me, it's a good thing you had a strong heart, and it's a good thing you weren't standing in water, because water conducts electricity. So I might have get electrocuted around the air on Across the Fence.
Today, a very special program to honor...
What do you think you meant to the program? What do you think you meant to those people out there?
Well, you kind of, I hate to say this, you kind of become a legend because they're used to your method of interviewing, and I try to make them feel at ease. Let me give you an example. I was the one who started having authors from Vermont appear on Across the Fence. So that was something they didn't have before. I called Chris Bojalian up, who I had some success, but he wasn't at the top then. And I explained who I was, and I said, I'd like to have you on Across the Fence. Oh, he said, I can't come on. I said, why not? He said, I'm not a television performer. I'm a writer. And I said, fine. I said, I'll tell you what you do. You come in, you sit with me, you look at me, you talk to me. We don't pay any attention to the camera at all. It's just a conversation between you and me. He came in, he did well, and then afterwards, he loved to come on because he felt at ease, you know. I tried to make people feel that we were talking one-on-one with your chair here and my chair there on across the fence without a camera. I said, ignore the camera. Camera doesn't count. Camera picks up and tells us what we're doing. We had a lot of authors on. In fact, I got a call from Montreal one day, and the guy explained, I wrote a nonfiction book, and he told me what it was about. He said, I live in Montreal. And I said, well, what would you like to do? And he said, I'd like to be on your program. You've had authors, and you do a good job with it. And so I invited him down, and we did. He said, I watched that Cross the Fence every day up in Montreal.
Would people, as you went around, would they recognize you, especially later with Across the Fence?
Yes. Some did with sports, because that was my #1 job. But others didn't watch sports, and they would watch Across the Fence, and they'd mention it. I remember once going into an elevator at UVM Medical Center, because I volunteered there for many years, and the elevator's loaded. And this young fellow looked over and he said, oh, I know you. Didn't you used to be a Tony Adams? And that broke up. That broke up the people in the elevator. And when it quieted down, I said, I used to be, and I think I still am.
Your host is Tony Adams.
I enjoy doing it every single day. I think a lot of that is due to the producer of Across the Fence, whom I worked with many years, Len Jarvis. He picked interesting people to talk to, and I tried to make them feel at home, as I explained before. If it's interesting to you and me, it's interesting to the people out there watching. We didn't try to get too pompous or official about things, but I felt it was great that way, and we had different groups in there. I mean, doctors would come in, and one of them, who I knew well at the medical center, so why don't you come into the operating room, get the scrubs on and make sure your hair is covered. And I went in, and the people were there, and they looked at me and they said, what's he doing here?
Right.
So I said something. I started to explain, and he walked in. He said, oh, this is Tony. We're doing a thing that he's interested in. So I sat there doing the thing, and while he was doing the procedure, and he explained everything to me, and I was in there for the entire procedure, then we used it on the air. We try to make it as relevant to the person off the street in layman's language. That's why we try to do an interview that way as we could, and I think it worked. It worked.
It sure did work. Tony left a mark on this state, this station, and this program. And along the way, he mentored a slew of young broadcasters, including myself. And I wouldn't be doing what I've been doing for the past 38 years if it wasn't for Tony. UVM Extension is also indebted to Tony for his decades of service.
I'm here today to make a couple of comments about a good friend. Tony Adams, a longtime host of Across the Fence and a friend of the University of Vermont, passed away this last week, and I just want to recognize what a good person he was. A long-standing community member who helped us all understand sports better on the TV and helped us host this wonderful program Across the Fence. He's a kind of person who made a contribution every day through his kindness, through his dedication, and through the passion he felt about the sports he covered and the people he interviewed. It's unfortunate that we have to say goodbye to Tony, but we can say thank you. Thank you for all the good years of service and accomplishment and being a member of our community. We'll miss you.
Well said, and thank you, Chuck. Now, as much as Tony enjoyed Across the Fence, he also enjoyed a friendship, a long-time friendship with his longtime producer, Len Jarvis. The two not only worked together, but they traveled the world together, laughing and learning along the way. They would often share travel adventures on Across the Fence. And when they traveled, they loved to eat. They were always on the lookout for the best local food. Across the Fence editor Marco Ayala occasionally traveled with Tony and with Len. And so to end today's program, we join Marco in a place that Tony always enjoyed, in the nation's capital with the cherry blossoms.
Today we're in the nation's capital for one of nature's most spectacular shows, the cherry blossoms. There is quite a story around how the cherry trees that adorn the tidal basin got there. In 1885, Eliza Rohama Sidmore, the first female board member of the National Geographic Society, approached the U.S. Army Superintendent of the Office of Public Buildings and Grounds asking that cherry trees be planted along the Potomac River, but her request was ignored. In 1909, Sidmore decided to take it upon herself to raise the funds needed to purchase the cherry trees, so she wrote a letter to the First Lady, Helen Herron Taft, outlining her plan, and the First Lady was quickly on board. Days later, Dr. Jokichi Takamine, a Japanese chemist visiting DC, asked the First Lady if she will accept a donation of 2,000 cherry trees. On December 10, the trees arrived in Seattle from Japan and started their journey to our nation's capital. Shortly after their arrival, the Department of Agriculture discovered that trees were infested and diseased, and they were ordered to be destroyed. Japan suggested a second donation, and on March 26, 1912, 3,020 cherry trees arrived in DC and were planted along the tidal basin. The first Cherry Blossom Festival was held in 1927. Today, the celebration spans 4 weekends in March and April and attracts more than 1.5 million people from all over the world. While this year the festival has been canceled due to the self-isolation and social distancing request, enjoy these images that I was able to take last year during a visit to our nation's capital.